Chapter 16. The arrival of Her Highness Princess Chrysrila, the most treasured daughter of His Imperial Majesty of the Druten Empire, radiates like a precious gem within the realm. This noble lineage, in this epoch, boasts an unparalleled fertility rate among emperors throughout the annals of history. With 16 princely heirs, the emperor has undoubtedly secured his reputation as the sovereign of royal progeny. Intriguingly, despite the remarkably high birth rate of princes, the occurrence of princesses remains exceedingly rare. Aside from the eldest princess, only the 9th offspring is a girl, while the remainder are boys. As the adage suggests, rarity enhances worth. Thus, the astute and enchanting Princess Chrysrila has become the apple of her father's eye and the delight of the queen. Whatever her heart may desire, regardless of the challenges involved, His Majesty would go to great lengths to fulfill her wishes. For instance, to prepare a garden for his beloved daughter. The emperor would not hesitate to wage war against foreign civilizations to grant her desires. Should one inquire who wields the most influence in the imperial capital after the emperor, the resounding answer would be Princess Chrysrila. Naturally, the indulged 9th princess has unwittingly cultivated a whimsical and extravagant disposition, intolerant of any dissent. Although her temperament may not be particularly gentle, countless individuals within the empire aspire to ascend the royal hierarchy. The princess is perpetually surrounded by admirers, as though she dismisses her swiftly supplanted by new suitors. Today, Princess Chrysrila finds herself engulfed in an overwhelming tempest of fury. Indeed, her wrath knows no limits. She had initially invited several esteemed nobles whom she admired to engage in a most enchanting game within the garden. Each participant would assume the role of a deity and orchestrate a magnificent battle among primitive tribes. She had painstakingly prepared for this occasion, even crafting a multitude of virtual scenes to vividly depict the divine conflict for the garden's inhabitants. Yet, alas, this exquisite plan was thwarted by malevolent assailants. Had the garden merely endured damage, her vexation might have been somewhat mitigated. After all, lost items could be reclaimed. However, the attackers obliterated the Royal Observation Station, the sole platform equipped with an extensive array of apparatus for conducting operations. Without the observation station, not only would it be a formidable challenge to control the tribal conflict, but showcasing divine feats would also become exceedingly arduous. How could this not kindle the ire of the princess, who arrived brimming with enthusiasm only to depart in disillusionment? Your Highness, please maintain your composure. I, Leia Holden, am fervently eager to serve your exquisite grace. Trust in my abilities. I shall bring those loathsome destroyers before you. As Princess Chrysrila furiously shattered her wine glass upon the ground, Viscount Leia Holden seized the opportunity to declare his resolve. Is that so? Viscount Leia Holden, I have only heard whispers of your prowess and merriment, yet never of your martial skills. Such endeavors necessitate the expertise of a specialist. Lord Lori Mistel and his vessel, the Wild Eagle, stand ready to serve you, and you shall behold what true courage and valor embody. The robust Viscount Lori Mistel cast a disdainful glance at the obsequious Leia, dismissing the slender nobleman with utter disregard for decorum. Lori Mistel's assertiveness is rooted in his own merit. A fervent warrior, he is already a designated commander within a star fleet, far more credible than those who squander their time in pursuit of trivial pleasures. Your Highness, do not place your trust in this uncouth brute. A man devoid of refinement will only bring you unwarranted tribulations. Leia Holden, now cast aside, flushed with indignation as his tone grew increasingly brusque. If I do not intervene, do you expect your subordinates, those delicate-faced gentlemen, to take action? Lori Mistel retorted, equally resolute. In his eyes, only formidable soldiers could be considered worthy warriors, while Leia's handsome, yet slight subordinates resembled models rather than true fighters. Princess Chrysrila paid no heed to the two suitors glaring at each other like roosters. Instead, her gaze shifted to a striking young man savoring fine wine nearby. He was the son of Duke Jesse C. Contras, the celebrated luminary of the Empire. Lord Rosencart, do you truly believe that the enigmatic assailants who disrupted my game are lurking nearby? Princess Chrysrila's inquiry naturally captivated the surrounding young nobles, whose gazes brimmed with envy, jealousy, and even resentment as they fixed their eyes on the dashing young man. Jesse C. Rosencart appeared indifferent to the piercing stares directed at him. With a subtle smile, he set down his wine glass and gracefully placed a hand upon his chest. Rest assured, the most enchanting princess of the Empire. Through my calculations over the past few days, I am certain that those mysterious assailants are concealed somewhere in the vicinity, stealthily approaching the Aratek star domain. The wisdom of Rosencart shall forever serve you. I hope your deductions prove accurate. A rare smile graced Princess Chrysrila's lips, inciting even more envy among the young nobles towards the seemingly astute Rosencart. They even harbored malicious wishes that his predictions would falter, providing them with an opportunity to deride him later. Dear noble warriors, I express my gratitude for your willingness to accompany me on this arduous pursuit. I must declare that whoever can vanquish these assailants and bring them before me shall earn my heartfelt appreciation. This individual will have the chance to spend a delightful holiday in my company. Who says Princess Chris Rila is merely a pleasure-seeking royal? In certain respects, she embodies the sagacity befitting her rank. Observe how the eyes of the noble youth shimmer with avarice. Even the typically stoic Jesse C. Rosenkart's countenance brightened, marked by a subtle uplift of his lips. Humph. Lori Mistel and Leia Holden exchanged a fierce glance before turning away, discreetly retrieving their communication devices. Aside from the two of them, merely two other nobles, accompanied by their own vessels, remained to monopolize the chance to spend a holiday in the princess's company. Their subordinates aboard the warships must act swiftly to secure their accolades. Jesse C. Rosenkart, lacking his own craft, appeared less preoccupied with winning Princess Chris Rila's favor and instead found the assailants to be of peculiar intrigue. Through his family's intelligence network, he inferred that these enigmatic attackers likely conspired with the armed forces that had seized control of the Dimitri mining star. Their capacity to infiltrate the very core of the empire and execute multiple successful operations over the years captivated his interest. Should the opportunity present itself, he longed to exchange insights with the commanders of these aggressors. Commander, reconnaissance vessels have identified a small Drutan fleet of 7 ships at the periphery of the asteroid belt. While engrossed in discourse with 2 Sicilians, Qin Jun received this unexpected intelligence, prompting him to spring to his feet. He quickly apologized to his companions and hastened toward the command cabin. Mo Ku and Zack exchanged exhilarated glances and cheered as they piloted their small vessels to follow suit. Ark, report the latest developments. I require precise information regarding the enemy's location, the types of warships involved, their deployment, and so forth. The sooner, the better. Please summon the heads of all departments to convene in the command chamber. Deploy the automated reconnaissance satellites to ascertain whether there are any concealed enemy warships in the vicinity. Sound a level 1 battle alert throughout the ship. Qin Jun disregarded the 2 flatterers trailing behind him and issued various commands in an authoritative tone. The Huaxia had navigated through the asteroid field without incident for so long, only to now confront potential hostilities. This raised grave concerns. Had these sudden adversaries been lying in wait, preparing a trap for them? The adversary is navigating on a course of 530, with a total of 7 warships detected. No additional forces are present in the immediate vicinity. 6 of these vessels belong to the mid to upper class category of new warships, somewhat larger than the Belanga-class attack ships, yet their capabilities remain uncertain. The remaining warship is akin to the Mariah-class command vessel, also possessing an unknown performance profile. The report from Ark caused Qin Jun to furrow his brow. 7 warships, all with ambiguous combat capabilities, including 1 substantial vessel. This uncertain strength represented a considerable threat to Huaxia. A single miscalculation could result in catastrophic repercussions. Is evasion a possibility? That shall prove to be quite a formidable challenge. They are strategically positioned precisely at the exit of the asteroid belt. To circumvent them, we would need to chart an alternate course, which would significantly diverge from our intended trajectory. Very well, direct the reconnaissance vessel to advance with the utmost vigilance. I must ascertain the identities of our adversaries. After a moment's reflection, Qin Jun relinquished the notion of seeking an alternate path. The Empire's pursuit of the Huaxia had intensified. Apart from hastily vacating the confines of Drutan, there was scant opportunity for maneuvering. Rather than squander precious time in search of an ambiguous alternative, it would be far more judicious to breach the enemy's defenses and forge ahead along the established route. Although the enemy's offensive capabilities remained indeterminate, Qin Jun was resolute in his determination to vanquish this modest fleet and carve a path to freedom. The latest visuals captured by the reconnaissance vessel were swiftly transmitted to the command chamber. As Qin Jun beheld the screen showcasing these unfamiliar warships, a look of astonishment graced his countenance. It was not the formidable nature of these vessels that astounded him, but rather the lavishness of each ship. Particularly striking was the largest among them, which radiated with a golden luminescence embellished with sumptuous adornments. To refer to it merely as a warship would be a grave understatement. It bore a closer resemblance to an opulent cruise liner. Commander, that is the Rose Queen, belonging to Her Highness Princess Clarice Rayla. I have seen it from a distance once before, exclaimed Stevenson, who had been summoned to the command chamber, his voice quaking with awe. The ship was so extravagant and breathtaking that he recognized it instantly. So, it is Her Highness who graces us with her presence. Qin Jun reflected in astonishment, realizing that the unforeseen obstacle before them was none other than the Empire's 9th princess, renowned for her affinity for ostentation. Chapter 17. The Guardian of the Flower is no easy task, Part 1. Alert. Alert. A significant energy response has been detected in the asteroid field ahead. Beware of asteroid impacts. The piercing alarm reverberated through the warship, prompting soldiers to hastily seek safe positions to evade the impending collisions. The vessels assigned to escort the Rose Queen were two elite new-class frigates dispatched from the Royal Guard. Slightly larger than the Belanga-class attack vessels, their offensive capabilities were comparable, yet their armor thickness and defensive capabilities were markedly enhanced. In this crisis, they served as the ultimate shield to safeguard the princess's vessel from peril. All departments, remain calm and prepare to obliterate the asteroids. Deploy the defensive shields and brace for impact to protect Her Highness and Apos' warship. Do not allow any asteroids to pass. All combat units maintain a state of readiness. Colonel Morse issued his commands with an air of composure, his steadfast presence alleviating the initial panic that had gripped the command chamber. Gradually, the crew regained their poise and began to methodically execute the colonel's directives. However, Colonel Morse harbored reservations regarding the princess's audacious undertaking. The pursuit of adversaries was a responsibility designated for local fleets, and the Empire's princess ought not to partake in such perilous exploits. Yet, Princess Clearis Rayla's obstinacy compelled him to acquiesce to her wishes against his better judgment, should the circumstances take a turn for the worse. Colonel Morse stood ready to invoke the special authority bestowed by His Majesty to extricate her from danger. It appeared that the princess's escapade was on the cusp of becoming a reality, undoubtedly a troublesome affair. Morse furrowed his brow as he beheld the encroaching swarm of asteroids. He was disinclined to accept that the asteroid field had erupted spontaneously with energetic disturbances. There must be a human factor at play, most likely connected to the enigmatic warship that had obliterated the princess's former plaything. Brace for impact. 10, 9, 8. The observer's countdown reverberated through the air, drawing all eyes to their designated sectors. Open fire. Intercept as many as possible. Colonel Morse maintained his composure as he surveyed the tumultuous scene of tumbling asteroids, concentrating on directing the warship's defenses against the impending assault. At the commander's behest, the combat stations unleashed torrents of flame. Countless energy beams sliced through the night sky, striking the asteroid swarm with unrelenting ferocity. Explosions of myriad hues illuminated the darkness. As the initial wave of asteroids, hurtling at great speed, failed to breach the dense barrier of light, shattering into smaller fragments. A few fortunate ones managed to penetrate the defensive net and collided with the warship's energy shields, generating only minor blue ripples that posed no threat to the vessel's integrity. Having successfully thwarted the first wave of asteroids, the soldiers felt no respite. More were on the horizon. Fire, fire. Aim carefully, shoot. The battle rooms reverberated with synchronized commands as soldiers fervently operated their controls, obliterating asteroid after asteroid. Despite their precise and concentrated efforts, numerous projectiles evaded interception and slammed into the warship's protective shields. Blue ripples flickered continuously across the vessel's surface, creating a mesmerizing spectacle from afar. Yet the once steadfast warship began to tremble from the impacts, causing some soldiers who had neglected to secure their safety harnesses to stagger unsteadily. How beautiful! The nobles aboard the Rose Queen observed intently as the escorting frigates executed their duties, with raucous applause erupting from the likes of the debauched Leia Holden. War is not as enchanting as you perceive. Please refrain from making statements that dishonor the valiant soldiers on the front lines. Lord Leia Holden. Lauren Mistiel found the nobleman increasingly irksome. The soldiers were valiantly safeguarding their lives while he waxed lyrical about beauty. What a thoughtless fool. What did you say, Lauren Mistiel? Do not presume that brute strength allows you to challenge the honor of nobility. The appreciation of beauty is beyond the grasp of someone as uncouth as you. Leia Holden seethed, incensed by Lauren Mistiel's incessant provocations. Had it not been for the presence of Princess Clearis Rayla, he would have summoned his attendants to impart a lesson to this ruffian for his insolence. Humph. I harbor no interest in trifling discourse with you, Lauren Mistiel derisively replied, turning to Princess Clearis Rayla and stating, Your Highness, your soldiers are valiantly fighting on your behalf. Please allow me to return to my own vessel to ensure your protection. Thank you, Lord Laurie Mistiel. I am truly appreciative of your aid. Please proceed. Princess Clearis Rayla stifled her rising excitement, nodding with an elegant smile. She sensed that the enigmatic warship was the force driving the meteorites toward her. Your Highness, permit Leia Holden to serve you and eliminate those audacious stones that dare to intrude upon your peace. Leia Holden fully grasped that this was his moment to demonstrate his valor. The cunning Laurie Mistiel had already outmaneuvered him, and he could not afford to squander this opportunity, lest he allow that boar to eclipse him. The other noble scions, commanding their own warships, were acutely aware that this was a moment to distinguish themselves before the princess, hastily articulating their fervent aspirations prior to their departure. This left those who had not brought their vessels to rue their choices. For such opportunities to exhibit one's prowess before royalty were indeed rare. They mourned their decision to forego their warships, thereby squandering an invaluable chance. Viscount Jesse C. Rosencart, however, refrained from participating in this rivalry, quietly observing the unfolding battle with a glass in hand, his gaze flickering with uncertain reflections. Commander, the impacts are intensifying. The energy of the shield is continually depleting, now below 20%. The aide's urgent shout jolted the perpetually furrowed brow of Colonel Morse. From the onset of the assault, he had never entertained the notion that the enemy, concealed behind the meteorites, could vanquish his elite fleet with mere stones. Yet, now the truth unfurled before him. The adversary's objective was not to obliterate the warships with meteorites. Their primary aim was to deplete his energy shield. A warship stripped of its defenses would be considerably easier to subdue. Nevertheless, to presume they could secure victory with such trivial tactics was a profound underestimation of his capabilities. Morse sneered, resolutely commanding his subordinates to endure the meteorite barrage, as the energy of the defensive shield dwindled to a mere thread. Insufficient to withstand the impending wave of attack, the torrential rain of meteors finally abated. Behind the scattered debris, a formidable warship gradually materialized on the screen. Unidentified warship has launched missiles. Prepare to intercept, the observer exclaimed nervously as he detected hundreds of tiny lights suddenly flickering from the opposing vessel. Colonel Morse frowned in dissatisfaction. Although the Royal Guard was elite, they had remained stationed in the imperial capital, participating in far too few skirmishes. Just a single missile assault had thrown these soldiers into disarray. Upon his return, he would advocate to His Majesty for the Guard fleet to engage in more actual combat to refine the soldiers' skills. Deploy decoy missiles, intercept the incoming missiles. Inform friendly ships to retreat slowly. All warships are to refrain from engagement without orders. Morse resolved to ensnare the enemy warship. Now, apart from the princess's vessel, he possessed 6 others at his disposal. Provided he could entice the enemy ship into the encirclement of his fleet, victory would merely be a matter of time. Why does that cowardly Morse retreat? What a splendid opportunity. Command the warships to launch an attack. Leah Holden chuckled as he observed the 2 retreating frigates from his command center. Indeed, what one contemplates often comes to fruition. The foolish frigate commander had unwittingly bestowed upon him a monumental triumph. Why delay any further? Young master, Colonel Morse has instructed us not to engage. The steward, acting as his aide, hesitated to offer counsel. Fool, when have I ever heeded that imbecilic Morse's commands? Have you lost your senses? Expecting me to follow the orders of a commoner? Disregard the orders. Attack. Attack. Leah Holden chastised the steward. Infuriated at the thought of squandering such a remarkable opportunity, an affront to the tactical brilliance of the illustrious Leah Holden, the steward initially hesitated but ultimately yielded to the desires of the young master. As the young master insisted on taking action, they prepared to advance. After all, the adversary possessed only a single warship, while they commanded a formidable fleet of 7. Surely, nothing could possibly go awry. The steward comforted himself as he swiftly directed the crew to comply with the young master's commands. The esteemed count emerged from the ranks, effortlessly seizing the attention of all the commanders of the warships. Noble heirs, eager to win the affections of the princess, promptly commanded their vessels to follow suit. Meanwhile, Laurie Mistier, who had initially intended to comply with orders, was ultimately engulfed by his competitive spirit and plunged into the conflict. These nobles, alas. After the noble count and 3 others hastened past his own vessel, Colonel Morse struck his fist upon the command console in exasperation. These oblivious noble scions had utterly derailed his plans, catching him unawares. How intriguing. So these are the nobles? Initiate operations in accordance with the original battle strategy. Qingjin held the enemy in considerable esteem. Initially, Morse's retreat posed a conundrum, prompting him to contemplate an alternative strategy. Yet, unexpectedly, as he readied himself, the opposing forces descended into disarray. Observing the 4 warships charging forth without any semblance of strategy, Qingjin could not suppress a chuckle. Chapter 18. The Guardian of Flowers is no easy task. Part 2. Missiles. Rapid Fire 3. Fighter Squadron. Prepare for launch. Colonel Qin Shaoan issued an array of commands with a tranquil demeanor from the first operations room. Prior to engagement, the launching of missiles and lasers to deplete the adversary's energy shield had become a conventional tactic in interstellar warfare, and the recently acclimated defenders were no exception. Fire. Full force. Missiles deployed. The noble military erupted into a cacophony of cries. Even before achieving optimal combat positioning, they unleashed a torrent of firepower, initiating an aggressive onslaught. Countless missiles erupted from their respective launchers, colliding mid-flight and igniting brilliant sparks. Unlike the noble forces, who relied on sheer numbers and clustered their fire. The missiles from Huaxia were not densely packed and displayed greater variability and cunning. When engaging with the adversary's missiles, they deftly maneuvered through the gaps, striking fiercely against the formidable hull. The tremors caused by the missiles striking the energy shield unleashed a cascade of panic and wrath among the haughty nobles, inciting a deluge of further missiles and energy beams to surge forth from their ranks. The screens of the command centers were awash with blinding flashes of explosions, rendering it nearly impossible to ascertain the true state of the conflict between the two forces. Boom! Over a dozen energy beams pierced through layers of defenses, striking the hull of the Huaxia and inducing violent oscillations. The newly reinforced armor exhibited its merits, intercepting the majority of the assaults at the surface. Aside from a few dislodged metal fragments, the warship suffered minimal damage. Although some beams breached the armor, creating hollow openings, they were promptly neutralized by the awaiting repair spray, sealing them securely. Curiously, throughout the battle, the Huaxia had not activated its energy shield, relying solely on its formidable armor to endure the relentless onslaught from the enemy. All operations rooms, open fire, concentrate fire on the foremost enemy vessel. The artillery crew, growing increasingly impatient, finally received orders from above, hastening to their stations with fervent cries. Having refrained from deploying its artillery systems until this moment, the Huaxia was at last poised to demonstrate its might against the adversary. As hundreds of beams of light surged forth at command, they hurtled towards the noble count. Witnessing the overwhelming barrage, the countenance of Viscount Leia Holden turned pale, instinctively shrinking beneath the command table. The violent collision left Leia only capable of cowering beneath the table, emitting cries of terror. As a carefree dilettante, accustomed to the frivolities of life, he had never encountered such harrowing events. In his navette, he had believed that interstellar combat entailed merely an exchange of missiles and lasers, followed by jubilant celebrations. Little did he know that the harsh reality of battle was far removed from the romanticized notions he had entertained, with peril lurking at every corner. Retreat. Retreat immediately. Despite the ferocity of the enemy's initial onslaught, the noble count suffered only slight damage, thanks to the protective shield. At that moment, Leia Holden relinquished any aspirations of glory, urgently commanding his vessel to retreat into the ranks. Gaining the favor of Her Highness had become inconsequential. The preservation of his life took precedence. Other nobles were similarly taken aback by the brutal assault endured by the noble count, which caused their advance to waver. However, Viscount Lori Mistier's Eagle of Fury did not falter. Rather, it surged forward with renewed determination. Commander, the enemy's flagship is beginning to withdraw, and another vessel has appeared from the flank. They are now directing their fire towards our ship. The intensity of the conflict overwhelmed the ordinary onlookers, rendering them unable to keep pace, while the formidable Ark assumed the role of primary observer. Ignore them. Concentrate all fire on that Imperial warship. Accelerate and close in. Qin Jin cast a determined glance at the emerging enemy vessel, steadfast in maintaining the current target. Engaging in a reckless 1-7 confrontation would offer little hope of victory. His greatest reliance lay not in his own ship, but rather in the impetuous nobles arrayed against him. The Huaxia advanced resolutely through the onslaught of artillery, confronting the noble count head-on. Attack! Attack! Do not allow it to approach. Faced with the encroaching enemy vessel, Leia Holden could formulate no other response than to cry out in desperation. In that moment, he lamented his neglect of studies. Having squandered his days in the company of women, had he devoted himself to mastering the art of commanding ships, he would not find himself ensnared in such a perilous situation. Young master, the energy of the shield has been depleted. We must depart immediately. The butler rushed forth, anxiety etched upon his features. As the one most acquainted with the family's affairs, he comprehended the vulnerability of the noble count without its protective shield. Before Leia Holden could comprehend the urgency, the butler lifted him and dashed towards the command cabin. Fire at will. As the butler had anticipated, the Huaxia redirected its assault towards the retreating noble count. Bereft of its protective shield, the noble warship unveiled its frailty. Hundreds of energy beams rained upon the noble count, igniting a cataclysmic explosion. Flames erupted from various points on the ship, and in the blink of an eye, the once mighty vessel began to disintegrate, shattering into countless fragments. Foolish Leia Holden. Lori Mistier observed in horror as the noble count was reduced to cosmic debris before his eyes. Despite his scornful words, a pang of sorrow gripped his heart, and his eyes reddened with unbidden emotion. Attack! Attack! Avenge Viscount Leia Holden. Lori Mistier furiously brandished his fists, casting aside his previous disdain for Leia, now singularly focused on upholding noble honor and vanquishing the loathsome foe. The valiant commanders aboard the other two vessels were equally unsettled by the fate that befell the noble count. Like Leia Holden, they were but frivolous aristocrats. their ships bedecked with extravagant embellishments at the cost of vital armor and equipment. Once the energy of the shields was depleted, their vessels would be ill-equipped to endure the enemy's ferocious assault. None desired to share the same ignoble destiny as Viscount Leia Holden. In a desperate bid for survival, one ship hastened towards the escort vessel helmed by Major Morse, while the other rushed towards the more fortified Eagle of Fury. Now is our opportunity. Deploy the fighter squadron. Qin Shaoan had been anticipating the moment when the enemy would descend into disarray. Seizing the moment, he promptly commanded the launch of his prepared space fighter squadron. All 340 space fighters were deployed without exception, swarming towards their designated targets. The majority directed their efforts towards the enemy vessel attempting to regroup with its allies, while a smaller contingent set its sights on the Eagle of Fury and another ship. Good heavens, fighter planes! Carson, mobilize your men and intercept them. Baron Polaros turned pale at the sight of the approaching fighters. Hastily ordering his squadron of combat aircraft into action, Carson and his subordinates shared his apprehension, reluctantly rushing towards their aircraft. It was not cowardice, but rather the harsh reality that their battleship possessed scant fighters. The extravagant owner had long since repurposed most of the compartments into gaming lounges, leaving the squadron with a mere 15 aircraft. Pitting such a meager force against hundreds of enemy fighters was tantamount to courting death. 15 fighters surged forth, quickly overwhelmed by the sheer number of enemy craft, failing to make even the slightest impact. The swiftest among them initiated their assault, unleashing a deluge of fire that left the enemy ship defenseless, clinging to the remnants of its shield for survival. These insipid noble fools. Fighter squadron, lend your assistance. Major Morse's paramount duty was to safeguard Her Highness. Thus, he remained resolute alongside the allied vessel, vigilantly protecting the Rose Queen. He had envisioned delivering a decisive blow once the nobles could no longer endure the relentless assault, leaving the enemy's ships fully vulnerable. Yet, in an instant, the noble count was annihilated, while another vessel was drawn perilously close. This noble ship, entangled with the fighters, had succumbed to chaos, veering wildly and obstructing his line of sight. To preserve the integrity of his strategy, he dispatched his subordinate fighters, hoping to aid the beleaguered Baron Polaros in reclaiming control of his ship and redirecting its course. The escort vessel boasted a modest contingent of fighters, numbering approximately 100 when combined with those aboard the accompanying ship. Although they could momentarily impede the enemy's advance, they lacked the potency to alter the course of the battle. What Major Morse could not anticipate was that the reason for Baron Polaros' ship losing control was a barrage of enemy missiles breaching the shield's vulnerabilities, fortuitously striking the command cabin. In that moment, the cowardly Baron Polaros had transcended the realm of reality, seeking solace with his ally, Viscount Leia Holden. Impact confirmed, victory secured. Exultation erupted aboard the Hawk. As a recent, devastating onslaught resulted in a tremendous explosion at the enemy vessel's stern. Massive fragments visibly tore away from the main warship. Lord Lowry Mistriel, filled with pride, reflected on his triumph. They must be reveling in their perceived advantage, Colonel Zhang Jianfeng remarked with a smile, observing two Drew-in warships swiftly approaching the main fleet from the debris field. He activated the communicator, issuing the command, Annihilators, deploy. Several modified, high-speed Annihilator suicide ships surged forth from the seemingly devastated area, hurtling toward the unsuspecting Hawk. What is this? Annihilators. Intercept them. Lord Lowry Mistriel, taken by surprise, noticed the small crafts emerging from what he had assumed to be mere wreckage. The distance between them was alarmingly brief, although the gunners managed to destroy a few. Two Annihilators breached the defenses and charged forward. No. Lord Lowry Mistriel uttered a desperate cry of despair as the Annihilator filled the viewport. Chapter 19. The Unenviable Task of a Guardian, Part 3, A Gaggle of Fools. Utterly ineffectual. Princess Chris Rila stared in disbelief at the unfolding catastrophe, struggling to comprehend the incompetence exhibited by the noble youths who had pledged her victory. For ships against one, yet they were being routed so thoroughly. Lowry Mistriel and Leia Holden lay dead, Baron Polaros was unreachable, and Baron Dokasiki's vessel, ravaged by the Hawk's self-destruction, was rendered incapable of combat. Now, aside from her flagship, the Rose Queen, only Commodore Morse's two frigates remained. When had the Empire's military become so feeble, unable to vanquish a solitary enemy ship despite their numerical superiority? However, it would be unjust to solely attribute the failure to the nobles' incompetence. Apart from Lord Lowry Mistriel, who bore the semblance of a soldier, the remainder were merely idle, pampered aristocrats. Expecting them to engage like seasoned warriors was unrealistic. The opulent, yet fragile, warships betrayed the true nature of these nobles. Not only was Princess Chris Rila astounded and infuriated, but the officers and crew of the China were equally taken aback. They had anticipated a significant cost to achieve their objective, yet the outcome far exceeded their expectations for relatively little expenditure. These outwardly imposing and sophisticated warships proved less resilient than standard patrol vessels. Your Highness, prepare the divine might. These adversaries are more formidable than we anticipated. Baron G.C. Rosenkater, forsaking his polished aristocratic facade, urgently cautioned his comrades. The preceding engagement had revealed that their adversaries were both seasoned and formidable. Despite the fact that 3 of their warships remained operational, he was engulfed by a sense of looming despair. Prepare to unleash the divine might. Princess Chrysrila, far from being a feeble woman, readily embraced Baron Rosenkater's counsel and commanded the captain of the guard accordingly. Divine might was the appellation bestowed upon the Rose Queen's principal cannon, a colossal energy weapon of tremendous destructive capability positioned at the vessel's prow. While it may not possess the same potency as a fortress cannon, it held the capacity to wreak havoc upon conventional warships. The energy fluctuations emanating from the charging divine might captivated the attention of both factions. Commodore Morse swiftly commanded his vessels to realign, lest they impede the cannon's firing arc and incur collateral damage. Now is the moment. Accelerate the assault. Full shields. Qingjin, upon receiving intelligence regarding the enemy's substantial energy accumulation, noted the approach of 2 enemy frigates. He promptly commanded in advance. A cerulean radiance enveloped the China as it boldly surged forward amidst the onslaught of enemy fire, plunging directly into the chasm between the adversarial warships. As Dr. Kongming had foreseen, the China's energy shields could endure the concentrated fire of an entire squadron. Regardless of Commodore Morse's maneuvers, the China resolutely increased its velocity. Advancing into the breach, gradually, the China nestled itself between the 2 warships. Commodore Morse's flagship lay to its port, while another Drutan frigate positioned itself to its starboard. The 3 vessels intertwined like a sandwich, and through the transparent observation windows, the crews could even discern one another's movements. The scene evoked the essence of a 19th-century naval conflict, where warships clashed in close quarters, surrounded by blinding flashes and thunderous detonations. Fragmented wreckage loomed perilously, poised to breach compartments and sever the heads of crew members. China, fortified by its unyielding energy shields, held a marked advantage over the Drutan vessels, experiencing considerably less damage. The majority of assaults were repelled by the shields, while those that breached them encountered robust armor plating, rapid-drying sealant, and efficient repair teams. China sustained its forward momentum, deftly bypassing the frigates and advancing toward the flanks of the Rose Queen. Should Commodore Morse, Princess Chrysrila, and Baron G.C. Rosenkater fail to discern the enemy's intentions, they would render themselves utter fools. The 2 frigates launched a desperate assault, striving to obstruct the progress of the China. Under the captain's command, the Rose Queen retreated, altering its course in an attempt to lure the enemy vessel into the firing range of the divine might, with hopes of neutralizing the threat. From a distance, the 4 warships appeared ensnared in a chaotic ballet, each maneuvering for advantageous positioning, yet unable to secure a decisive edge. The situation had devolved into a stalemate. As the energy of China's shield began to wane, Qingjin, who had remained composed thus far, felt a surge of anxiety. Should a breakthrough not be realized promptly, the circumstances would swiftly deteriorate, and their advantage would be forfeited. Commander, message received. Operation Sicily is underway and proceeding smoothly. I repeat, Operation Sicily is underway and proceeding smoothly. The communications officer's proclamation brought a wave of relief to the command deck. At last, it had commenced. ARC, maintain our course and persist in engaging the enemy. Inform Colonel Gu Jinghan to prepare for deployment. Understood. Qin Zhen tapped his fingers against the console, his gaze fixed intently on the movements of the Rose Queen. This operation was a gamble, its success hinging on this very moment. Continue turning southeast, maintain stability. Direct Commodore Morse to restrain them, preventing their free maneuvering. If necessary, ram them. G.C. Rosenkater took the helm of the Rose Queen, issuing commands to the fleet. Among those remaining aboard, he was the sole individual capable of navigating the intricate situation. The other nobles were paralyzed by fear, having been whisked away by their mates. Rosenkater was confident in his ability to stave off engagement by the warships until the enemy had exhausted their resources. Once the opportunity presented itself, victory would belong to Drutan. To him, G.C. Suddenly, a violent tremor shook the ship, causing Rosenkater to lose his balance and strike his head against the deck. What is happening? Power chamber. Energy supply room. Report what is transpiring. Control center. Rosenkater shook his head as he rose from the ground, pushing away the maid who attempted to bandage him. Ignoring the blood cascading down his face, he urgently shouted into the communication channel. A surge of panic coursed through him as he realized that amidst the tremors, the Rose Queen was losing speed, its directional maneuvering becoming alarmingly sluggish. In such a critical moment, how could he not feel shocked and flustered? Commander, the enemy's flagship has slowed down. Its maneuvering is stiff. The plan has succeeded. The communications officer reported excitedly, trembling with exhilaration. Excellent, Shinjin declared, slamming his fist on the console and laughing heartily. Let us close in. Team 6, prepare for action. The peculiar movements of the Rose Queen did not elude the keen observation of Colonel Morse, whose heart was gripped by trepidation. He comprehended all too acutely the implications of losing agile maneuverability. Yet, he found himself rendered impotent to intervene. Following a fierce confrontation, his escort vessel had sustained grievous damage, with mounting casualties and drastically diminished navigational capabilities, leaving it unable to thwart the enemy's advance. Colonel, let us ram them, the lieutenant cried out fervently. As members of the Imperial Guard, their solemn duty was to safeguard the royal family. Should any harm befall Her Highness, even if they survived, the Emperor would show them no mercy. For the sake of their families and loved ones, they had no alternative but to charge forth, fully aware that it could lead to their demise. It is too late, Colonel Morse exclaimed, pointing at the screen. In that fleeting moment, the enemy warship had already closed in on the Rose Queen. Any attempt to ram now would not only annihilate the enemy vessel, but could also jeopardize the princess's safe passage. Are we merely to stand idle and do nothing? The lieutenant was nearly frantic. He feared for his life, yet could not allow his family to suffer the consequences of his inaction. No. Morse's eyes gleamed with resolute determination as he adjusted his military cap and commanded into the communicator, all units, prepare for combat. Everyone must don combat gear. As we approach the enemy ship, we shall launch an immediate assault. I mean everyone, including non-combatants. Anyone who fails to engage will face dire repercussions. Promptly inform the second ship to halt their attack and redirect all reinforcements to the Rose Princess. Should anything happen to Her Highness, do not return alive. Yes, sir. Regrettably, the other escort vessel could not accomplish its mission. Just as it was nearing the Rose Queen, several missiles launched from the Huaxia struck its ammunition storage. After a brief struggle to advance, the entire warship erupted in a blinding flash, disintegrating in the vastness of space. Your Highness, I have failed you. This area is exceedingly perilous. The enemy is boarding. Please evacuate at once. I have arranged for the lifeboat, ready for departure. Lamented Rosencarter, his head bowed low, bearing the weight of having been overwhelmed by the enemy for the first time since earning the accolade of the Rising Star. No, it is not your fault. You have performed admirably. I am the Princess of the Empire, embodying the honor and dignity of the royal lineage. Claire Rila shall never retreat like a beaten dog before the foe. Soldiers, prepare for battle. For the first time, the ninth princess exhibited her extraordinary bravery before her peers. She opted for confrontation rather than retreat. It appears our adversaries are both astute and remarkably valiant, if not stubborn. Command the troops to ready themselves for combat. Shinjin was somewhat taken aback that the enemy's escort commander chose to strike here instead of reinforcing the princess. However, this proved advantageous. By engaging the regular forces on the warship, it would alleviate the pressure on the attacking forces. They should not presume that deploying a substantial number of combat troops would leave the area vulnerable. Everyone aboard the Huaxia would convey that assaulting here would be the gravest of mistakes, a veritable nightmare. Chapter 20, Dual Fronts. Warriors, advance, advance. We must capture the enemy's command system before they reach the princess. Swiftly, move forward. Colonel Morse rallied his troops. Surrounded not only by well-trained soldiers, but also by chefs, maintenance workers, medical personnel, and other non-combatants aboard the vessel. All members of the escort ship took up arms at the behest of their leader, joining the fray. With no possibility of retreat, the colonel had chosen to commit fully, placing every hope upon this endeavor. The initial boarding operation unfolded seamlessly, enhanced by their numerical superiority and fervent combat spirit, as the soldiers overwhelmed the defenders, thereby creating ample space for the reinforcements that streamed in. Yet, just as they began to feel assured in their territorial gains, unforeseen complications emerged. Attention, it's a covert particle generator. Immediately deactivate energy weapons. This could lead us to utter devastation. Several oddly shaped, disc-like objects were launched from the enemy's defensive position, prompting a drastic shift in Colonel Morse's demeanor as he cautioned his subordinates. The covert particle generator, ominously dubbed the Badge of the Brave, was first employed by the Drutans. Once activated, this peculiar apparatus emitted inexplicable and bizarre substances. Any contact with energy beams would provoke a violent reaction with the oxygen atoms in the atmosphere, culminating in an inferno that would incinerate everything in proximity. This device was standard equipment for boarding operations, meticulously designed to curtail the enemy's defensive capabilities. The mere fact that the adversary had deployed this apparatus first signified their confidence in securing victory in close combat. Colonel Morse comprehended that a fierce confrontation was imminent. Men, follow me. Colonel Kaijinjire, clad in standard combat attire and wielding a matching command sword, rallied his troops. Do not presume that this former commander of the Imperial Guard would merely wield a baton from a safe distance. He was also a skilled practitioner of hand-to-hand combat. Armed equally with a command sword, Colonel Morse swiftly identified the middle-aged men leading the charge on the opposing side, who bore the hallmarks of a high-ranking officer. When the enemy made a provocative gesture, Morse, ignited by the adrenaline of battle, fearlessly surged forward. The sharp clash of blades resonated as they were on the verge of colliding. To Morse's astonishment, he found himself compelled to retreat during their initial exchange. The tremendous force from the sword's hilt rendered his entire arm numb. Such formidable strength. Morse regarded his nearby adversary, his expression growing somber. As a member of the Royal Guard, he not only possessed exceptional tactical skills, but was also remarkably proficient in combat. Anyone capable of forcing him back in their first encounter was undoubtedly a formidable opponent demanding his utmost concentration. Kaijinjie smiled faintly. This Drutan officer was indeed intriguing, managing to withstand 70% of his strength in that strike. Impressive. This deployment had not been in vain after all. Eliminate. The two men locked eyes for a fleeting moment before simultaneously erupting into shouts and charging forward. In an instant, they became entwined in a fierce struggle, neither able to gain the upper hand. The chilling glint of blades and the ominous shadows of swords rendered the surrounding soldiers on both sides hesitant to intervene, compelling them to navigate cautiously around this perilous battleground. Unlike Colonel Morse, who manages to engage his adversary in a temporary stalemate, the other Drutan soldiers are not so fortunate. In their pursuit of seizing the enemy vessel, the Imperial Guard primarily prepared energy weapons, with only a scant few armed with metallic melee implements. Now, confronted with an opponent who is fully equipped and unable to employ their favored armaments, these valiant and impassioned soldiers find themselves caught off guard. Chairs, pipes, and discarded gun barrels have now transformed into instruments of battle. Though they are not lacking in courage and resolve, the adverse circumstances compel them to gradually retreat. Some soldiers, momentarily sidelined, swiftly comprehend their predicament and race back to their ships in search of suitable combat tools for their comrades. Colonel Morse observes all of this with mounting urgency. Yet he feels utterly powerless. His opponent proves to be exceedingly formidable, launching fierce assaults with cunning maneuvers that leave him bewildered, unable to divert his attention to other matters. However, despite his forces being pushed back, they have yet to reach a point of utter collapse. As long as he can hold these elite adversaries at bay for a sufficient duration, another squad led by Major Anderson, composed of the true members of Team 6, can more easily infiltrate the enemy's command center. Is the situation truly as straightforward as Colonel Morse envisions? Major Anderson, who is exceptionally equipped for combat within the confines of a vessel, presently confronts a remarkably formidable adversary. This opponent is commanded by Colonel Li Feng, who leads a contingent of technicians from Huaxia, tasked with executing engineering repairs. One must not underestimate these technicians, who are ordinarily engaged in the assembly of components. When they relinquish their wrenches and seize weaponry, they metamorphose into fierce and formidable combatants. Each individual has undergone years of arduous military training, honing combat skills that rival those of the Drutan Imperial Guards. Amidst the throng, one can also discern Dr. Lu Mei at the helm of a cadre of medical personnel. Although these delicate women may not rush to the front lines of conflict, their keen surgical instruments are poised to strike at the most vulnerable points when one is least vigilant. The members of Major Anderson's Team 6 are exceptionally equipped, and although they are unable to wield energy weapons, they possess apt melee implements. Intense and brutal combat unfolds within every room and corridor of the warship. The sounds of roars and dying screams resonate so vividly that even Qinjun, situated deep within the command cabin, can hear them distinctly. Commander, where do you think you are going? Colonel Kaijinhao firmly restrains his superior, questioning him with stern resolve. Where else would I go but to assist? Have you not heard these cries? Our comrades are fighting valiantly while I cower here doing nothing. Who can endure such a reality? Qinjun nearly bellows at his chief of staff, unable to tolerate the sight of everyone striving heroically while he remains passive. The fervor within him demands action. He feels an overwhelming need to stand shoulder to shoulder with his allies in battle. Sit down, Commander. You must endure, even if it is difficult. Remember, you are the commander of us all. Your battlefield is not outside, but right here. This command room is where you must fight. Kaijinhao sternly admonishes his impulsive superior, exerting all his strength to keep him firmly in his seat. with Major Su Min, the aide, stepping in to assist. After several futile struggles, Qin Jin reluctantly concedes. He understands the chief of staff is correct, yet he finds it impossible to suppress the fiery urge to fight. In the midst of this inner turmoil, he suddenly recalls General Fan Yun, who always preferred to engage at the forefront. The general had gradually diminished his own participation in perilous engagements, likely due to circumstances akin to his own. Let go. I will no longer act impulsively. Qin Jin slowly tempers his fury, signaling for his chief of staff to release him. Kai Jinhao scrutinizes the commander for a moment, ensuring he has indeed regained his composure before finally loosening his grip. The success of a battle heavily relies on the highest commander's steadiness and clarity of mind. Only a leader who remains calm and collected amidst the chaos of the battlefield can strategize effectively and attain victory. Should Qin Jin persist in his desire to engage in combat, Kai Jinhao would no longer oppose him, indicating that perhaps he is unfit for this position and that Hua Xiao might seek a more suitable individual to occupy that chair. Ark, report the latest developments. Qin Jin diverts his attention from the battlefield and resumes his responsibilities. Report, Commander. There have been no alterations. All proceeds as intended. Colonel Gu Jinghuan's forces have breached the enemy flagship and are advancing toward the control center. If all unfolds favorably, they are anticipated to arrive in approximately 45 minutes. Why the delay? Show me the footage. Qin Jin is taken aback by Ark's intelligence. In his estimation, considering Team SIX's formidable offensive capabilities, they ought to require merely 20 minutes to fulfill their mission. Why has the duration doubled? Could the Princess's Guard truly be that formidable? When the detailed images finally stream onto the screen, Qin Jin comprehends how Ark derived its information. Chapter 21, Dual Fronts, Part 2. It appears that Princess Crisrella and Qin Jin have employed akin strategies in response to their respective circumstances. When her forces began to wane against the protective guards, the princess decisively activated the covert particle generator and deployed her elite unit. It is this distinctive team that has impeded the advancing troops, obstructing their progress. Kowido, as a sacred knight, how dare you assault the goddess's chariot? Disarm yourself, and I shall spare your life. Upon witnessing the formidable array of warriors alongside Colonel Gu Jinghuan, Kowido finally realizes where the legendary heroes, once elusive on Garden Star, have ended up, all brought aboard the warship by the Drute and Princess to serve as her protectors. Perhaps, upon meeting certain criteria, he too might join their ranks? A self-deprecating smile graces his face. After spending time aboard the Hua Xia, he recognizes that notions of goddesses and divine beings are mere fabrications. He, along with everyone on the planet, are simply pitiable pawns. Rather than becoming a so-called goddess's guard, he yearns for the carefree days aboard the Hua Xia. Barbarossa. Once a great warrior and valiant dragon slayer, I did not expect to find you here, forsaking the honor of a hero to grovel at the feet of a woman. Content to be a mere lapdog, Kowido scornfully taunts his opponent, fully aware that he will never sacrifice his freedom for the sake of that so-called goddess. Do not insult the goddess, nor my honor. You shall pay with your life. Barbarossa, incensed by the affront, lunges forward, determined to obliterate this audacious youth and to manifest to all the repercussions of offending him and the revered goddess. Pah, such folly regarding a goddess. Kowido defiantly spits, undeterred as he steps forth. Perhaps in bygone days, he would have been no match for this formidable adversary. But having mastered a myriad of exquisite Chinese martial arts, he now exudes confidence in his capacity to prevail. Charge. Colonel Gu Jinghuan, envious of Kowido for encountering such a worthy foe, nonetheless suppresses his own yearning for battle, concentrating on guiding his subordinates. He remains unhurried. In the absence of Barbarossa, others from Garden Star still remain. Each of these individuals is a paragon in their own right, and worthy adversaries are never in scarcity. Among the multitude of skilled individuals chosen from Garden Star, while their ability to collaborate as a unit may not rival that of the formally trained soldiers of the Empire, their individual combat prowess is undeniably formidable. Confronted by the elite members of Team 6, they stand their ground, even amidst a 1-on-3 encounter. The presence of these individuals considerably obstructs the advance of the troops, significantly extending the duration required to accomplish the mission. This will not suffice. The longer we procrastinate, the more detrimental it becomes for our position. Qin Jin, in a state of agitation, raked his fingers through his hair as he surveyed the impasse. After all, this is sovereign territory where rival forces may materialize at any moment. Should the Drute and military intercept the distress signal from the Rose Queen, an overwhelming tide of warships would undoubtedly engulf us. Deploy Colonel Jiang Jianfeng along with his special operations team to ensnare these combatants. Team 6 must act with the utmost urgency to capture Princess Crisrella in the briefest time conceivable. After much deliberation, Xinjun resolved to unveil his ultimate secret weapon. The enemy may bide their time, but he cannot afford such luxury. Let the team commence their mission. Colonel Zhang Jianfeng exclaimed with fervor, only to be met with the chilling silence of his subordinates, who offered no reply. He commanded a unit comprised of the latest combat automatons engineered by the Department of Technology. Though their numbers were scant, approximately 20, their formidable 2-meter height, while lacking in raw offensive capabilities and adaptability, was compensated for by their remarkable durability and resilience. They should be capable of temporarily restraining some of the less astute primitive warriors. The introduction of the combat robots alleviated the tension among the members of Team 6. The unyielding goddess guardians had proven excessively powerful, leaving the entire unit ensnared, unable to advance or retreat. With the formidable robotic warriors at their side, they harbored hope of achieving their mission successfully. Leave a contingent behind to support the mechanical warriors. The remainder should disregard this place and swiftly progress towards the control center. Gu Jinghan lamented as he fended off a brutish opponent, recognizing that locating an adversary of equal strength was no simple feat to fulfill the mission. He was compelled to begrudgingly sacrifice some resources to those cold, metallic allies. The Druid ants were averse to the utilization of robots, and the elite guardians encircling the princess had never encountered such formidable machines of warfare. Confronted by these imposing and robust automata, they found themselves at a loss. Grappling with the challenge of engagement, they could only stand helplessly as numerous members of Team 6 surged past them, racing towards the rear passage. Your Highness, it appears our strategy has faltered. Rosencarter lamented, his gaze fixed on the unfolding battle. The defenses of the Rose Queen were alarmingly feeble. Aside from a solitary unit of guards, the only other defenders were the savage warriors stationed outside. The remaining personnel comprised maids and service staff, wholly devoid of any combat prowess. No matter the extent of his skill, without armaments, he could do naught but observe as the adversary advanced. Has the distress signal been dispatched? Princess Crisrella inquired with a composed demeanor, seated amidst the turmoil. Her maid the sole witness to the faint trickle of blood seeping from her tightly clenched fingers. It has indeed been sent. However, the nearest military station lies several days' journey away. Even with rapid travel, they cannot arrive in a timely manner. Rosencarter expressed, exasperated that, despite his burgeoning reputation, he could conjure no viable solutions in this dire moment. How much longer can we endure? Princess Crisrella posed to the anxious captain of the guards, who stood ready with his weapon at the door. We can likely withstand the siege for another 15 minutes, Your Highness. The captain responded, striving to convey the harsh reality. He felt an overwhelming sense of shame for placing the princess in such jeopardy. Alas, Princess Crisrella sighed, her visage resolute as she proclaimed, let all weapons be surrendered. We capitulate, Your Highness. Both the captain and Rosencarter exclaimed in disbelief. Too many lives have been irretrievably lost. Remaining here constitutes a grave error. I extend my deepest apologies to all. The princess's words brought tears to the eyes of those present. The maidens began to weep uncontrollably. Your Highness, please don this garment. Rosencarter advanced, bearing a uniform traditionally worn by maids. Princess Crisrella regarded Count Rosencarter, and in their silent exchange, neither spoke, their gazes intertwined in profound understanding. It was over, when Count Rosencarter, standing in for the princess, called for all to lay down their arms and cease their resistance. The brief and brutal skirmish reached its inevitable conclusion. Coincidentally, at the instant the Rose Queen surrendered, the battle aboard the Huaxia ship was also approaching its denouement. The majority of the elite soldiers lay slain in pools of blood, with only a scant few fortunate survivors lacking the strength to rise. The anguished cries of the wounded reverberated throughout, with only a few corners still resonating with faint sounds of combat. Brave Colonel Morse lay face down in a pool of blood, a deep gash marring his neck, his wide-open eyes fixed upon the blood-stained wall. The remnants of a once proud sword were tightly clenched in his hand, refusing to relinquish their grip despite his waning strength. Surrounding him were the lifeless bodies of elite soldiers, their blood merging to form a crimson river that slowly trickled into the abyss. You were a worthy adversary, yet alas, you were born in the wrong place. Kai Jinjia wiped his command knife with a handkerchief, discarding the bloodied cloth, which landed gently upon Morse's face, obscuring his defiant expression. Major Anderson, gasping for breath against the wall, was too exhausted to feel the agony coursing through him. He struggled to turn his head, his eyes surveying the scattered bodies of his comrades. I have failed. I have failed. Forgive me, Colonel. Major Anderson's vision began to blur, and in the haze, he seemed to perceive his beloved family approaching with smiles, a beautiful arc forming at the corners of his mouth. Commander, we are detecting intense energy fluctuations to our rear and right side. Two large fleets are swiftly approaching our position, expected to arrive in 33 minutes. Qin Jun and Kai Jinhao exchanged glances, silently exclaiming, "That was close." Chapter 22. A reluctant choice. Time is of the essence. Report to Major General Maxwell. We have pinpointed the location of the assailant's warship, yet they have seized Princess Chris Rella's vehicle as a hostage. I urgently require new directives. Colonel Pifudin's voice quivered, enraged by the audacity of the brigands who dared to abduct the princess, the Emperor's most beloved daughter. Colonel Pifudin could scarcely comprehend the shock and fury that would ensue upon the Emperor's receipt of this news. Understood, sir. We must. The aide's countenance was pallid. Anyone confronted with such a dire situation would feel their heart race and be rendered paralyzed. He found himself at a loss. As the kidnapping of the princess left everyone awash in disbelief. Bang! When Major General Soroto Maxwell at the Star Domain Defense Headquarters received this alarming news, he was so taken aback that he toppled from his chair. Upon repeatedly verifying the authenticity of the information, his complexion drained of color. As a senior commander of the Empire, he comprehended more acutely than anyone the dreadful tempest this revelation would unleash within the Empire. Not all could endure the Emperor's wrath. What in the world was the princess doing there? Were her guards utterly inept, incapable of confronting a band of brigands? General Soroto Maxwell was engulfed by an overwhelming sense of frustration, nearly wishing to chastise himself for having dispatched search teams to relentlessly pursue the marauders' warships. Had he recalled Colonel Pifudin sooner, the present predicament would have been of no concern to him. Yet now, Pifudin's fleet had already engaged the bandits. And no matter how he sought to extricate himself from the situation, he could not evade responsibility. His primary concern had shifted from the annihilation of the marauders to the safeguarding of Princess Kaoises. Even the loss of a single strand of her hair would spell disaster for Soroto Maxwell. Swiftly, someone. Immediately transmit a telegram to Colonel Pifudin. Instruct him to employ every conceivable measure to ensure the safety of Her Highness, Princess Kaoises, until she is liberated from the clutches of the bandits. He must refrain from any form of confrontation with them. Inform him that as long as they guarantee the princess's safety, we are willing to concede to any demands. The extermination of the marauders is of secondary importance. The princess's well-being is paramount. Hurry! General Soroto Maxwell bellowed at his approaching aide, who was taken aback by the general's uncharacteristic demeanor, hastily rushing to the control room. Rising from the ground, Soroto Maxwell contemplated briefly before dialing a communication number. Hello. Is this General Ravenhoff? This is General Soroto Maxwell. As soon as the connection was established, he could hardly contain his urgency. Even before the figure on the screen became discernible. It is I, Soroto Maxwell. An elderly general appeared on the screen, his weary eyes rimmed with red, reflecting his distress. You are already aware. Maxwell realized that Ravenhoff was informed of the princess's abduction. Need I say more? That region is within my jurisdiction. How could I not be aware of such an extraordinary incident? General Ravenhoff glared weakly at Maxwell, exhaling a heavy sigh. He had anticipated a few more years of service before retiring honorably, indulging in a peaceful existence with his pension. Yet, he never envisioned that such a monumental crisis would unfold in his domain. This news had robbed him of sleep for several nights, each time he closed his eyes. He envisioned the Imperial Guards storming his residence, binding him and his family to a dreadful guillotine. My old friend, since this calamity has befallen us both, it is merely unfortunate luck. Our foremost priority now is to ensure the safe return of Her Highness. We must collaborate closely. Maxwell sighed in agreement. I understand. Speak. What are your proposals? General Ravenhoff nodded, his gaze keen as he awaited a solution. He had exhausted all possible ideas and now hoped for Maxwell to present a viable plan. My lord, we have arrived too late. Tim Robbins lamented to his master as they observed the three warships entangled in a fierce confrontation, signaled by warnings to keep all vessels at bay. Indeed. I did not anticipate their formidable strength. To triumph against 7 adversaries is truly remarkable, Berg von Allenstert remarked with astonishment. Having intercepted this news while escorting supplies from his family to the front lines, he had abandoned his merchant vessel and fleet, only to arrive too late to seize the glory that slipped through his fingers. Sam, do we know who has abducted the princess? Allenstert inquired, captivated by the formidable and enigmatic marauders. Even he could not assure that a solitary warship could undertake such an audacious operation. According to the rescued Viscount Leah Holden, they are not Drutans. They bear a striking resemblance to Earthlings. Tim Robbins stroked his beard, contemplating their failure to rescue the princess. Despite having successfully retrieved the lifeboat carrying Viscount Leah Holden and saved everyone aboard, while Holden had not directly confronted the enemy, he had gleaned insights regarding their adversaries from intercepted communications. Earthlings. Allenstert was taken aback. He had never linked these mysterious assailants to Earth. Now, reflecting upon it, Only the cunning and unpredictable strategies of Earthlings could disrupt the tranquility within the Empire. His instincts suggested that those aboard the opposing warships were likely his former adversaries, the Chinese. "My lord, what shall we do now? Shall we pursue them as they do?" Tim Robbins gestured towards the military fleet cautiously trailing the enemy. "Hesitant to encroach upon their territory. Let us maintain our distance. Our primary objective is to ensure the princess's safety. Everything else is of no concern." Alistair perceived this incident as an opportunity, a chance to reclaim his title. If he could earn Princess KLYSS's gratitude, his return to the ranks of nobility would be within reach. Suddenly, he recollected the Viscount Leah Holden, who had been rescued by his fleet. Perhaps this individual would prove invaluable in the future. "Come, Sam. Let us pay a visit to the esteemed Viscount Leah Holden," Alistair declared, exiting with an enigmatic smile. Although the Earthlings had emerged victorious in this skirmish, their losses were equally devastating. Almost every participant bore injuries. Over 200 had perished in battle, and hundreds more required extended recuperation due to grievous wounds. Following an intense confrontation, exhaustion enveloped the survivors, and their combat efficacy dwindled. The Huaxia was severely battered, especially in the vicinity of the enemy's landing site, where every chamber endured varying degrees of damage, necessitating extensive repairs. The previously captured destroyer had been rendered ineffective, and the fighter squadron experienced significant attrition, with numerous aircraft and skilled pilots lost. Such personnel constituted invaluable assets, and training replacements would not yield immediate results. The artillery systems also encountered over 100 malfunctions or breakdowns, urgently demanding repairs. Fortunately, this battle culminated in the capture of Princess KLYSS Rayla, along with Viscount Jesse C. Rosencarter and dozens of other esteemed noble hostages, alongside thousands of noncombatants. This acquisition dissuaded the approaching Drutan reinforcements from acting impulsively. Otherwise, the repercussions would have been catastrophic. The Drutan military captives, wounded soldiers, were swiftly sent to a warship that had been stripped of its entire crew. At a propitious moment, this vessel would sever its ties with the Huaxia and navigate back to enemy territory. It was not that Qin Zhen and his companions desired to forsake the warship. Rather, they simply lacked the necessary manpower to operate it. Excluding those in need of recovery, they found it challenging to manage the Rose Queen. Had it not been for Dr. Kong Ming's timely activation of the extensive array of work robots in storage, they would have been unable to tow the Rose Queen. "Thank you, Moken Zak. Without your valor, our triumph would not have been so readily achieved. Your heroic narratives shall echo throughout the entirety of the Sicilian lineage." Qin Zhen extolled the virtues of the two diminutive Sicilians. Who could have foreseen that the essence of victory resided in the contributions of these seemingly inconsequential beings? Amidst the tumultuous battlefield, no one could perceive the Sicilians, scarcely the size of a thumb. Yet, it was through their assistance that Qin Zhen succeeded in disrupting the energy systems and propulsion facilities of the Rose Queen at a pivotal moment. Occasionally, the most unobtrusive elements can profoundly alter the trajectory of an entire conflict. At this moment, Imoku and Jaku were so elated that they appeared to have lost their sense of direction, merely reveling in whimsical laughter and exuberant leaps. They were extraordinarily pleased with today's audacious venture, their hearts overflowing with pride. Who dares to assert that the Sicilian people are frail without our presence? How could they ever attain ultimate victory? "Commander, do you genuinely wish to retain Princess Chris Ryla by your side while navigating the Aerotech Star Domain?" Colonel Kaizenhao inquired. His brow furrowed as he observed his jubilant superior. "Why not? With the princess as our leverage, the Drutan would be reluctant to act recklessly, providing us with the most advantageous shield as we depart the imperial territories." Qin Zhen was bemused by the chief of staff's question. Deeming it a straightforward matter requiring little contemplation, Colonel Kaizenhao merely smiled, choosing to say nothing further. Sometimes, it is only through the unfolding of events that one can truly comprehend and evolve. Why not express your thoughts? Kaizenhao gently nudged his brother's shoulder, casting a glance at the commander who was still frolicking with his subordinates. Perhaps it is best to refrain for the moment. He executes his role adequately as a commander on a tactical level, yet he lacks in strategic foresight. Learning through experience is vital for authentic maturation, Kaizenhao chuckled, shaking his head. Indeed, encountering certain setbacks can expedite growth. Kaizenhao nodded in agreement, opting not to hasten and pointing out the deficiencies in Qin Zhen's plans. Two sluggishly advancing colossal warships steadily approached the Aerotech Star Domain, accompanied at a distance by over 100 ships of various designs, with many more hastening from other locations to reinforce the main fleet. The tail of the Huaxia was indeed expanding. "What did you say?" "The Conrad Sun Interstellar Alliance has rejected our request for asylum and prohibited our warships from entering their territory," Qin Zhen exclaimed in astonishment, gazing at the reporting communications officer, unable to comprehend why the Conradson Alliance would deny his plea. Commander, while Princess Chris Ryla is indeed a valuable asset in our arsenal, she also embodies a double-edged sword. You have contemplated her utility but overlooked the essence of the Niño. Beyond their avarice and frugality, they are an exceedingly self-serving race. They are acutely aware of the princess's influence over the Empire and the Drutin Emperor. At present, 5 Drutin forces stand ready to assault the Conradson Alliance, representing the pinnacle of the Alliance's defensive capability. Should Princess Chris Ryla venture onto their territory, what do you believe the Drutin Emperor would do? To my knowledge, he harbors considerable affection for her. He would spare no effort for her sake. Once she falls into the grasp of the Niño, they would never permit her to depart casually, as the dignity of their nation would hang in the balance. The wrath of the Imperial Emperor would be unfathomable. Chief of Staff Kaijin Hao patiently elucidated to the perplexed commander. He would undoubtedly be incensed and would dispatch even more fleets to the front lines against the Conradson Alliance. It could be 10 fleets, perhaps 20, or even the entirety of the nation's military might. I understand now. Qingjin abruptly comprehended that he had only contemplated the princess's worth in his possession, while disregarding the responses of other stakeholders. In more profound realms, he still lacked the requisite experience and foresight. Qingjin's surmise was not unfounded. The imperial sovereign had already issued a comprehensive mobilization decree. Should the 9th princess succumb to the grasp of the Niño, he would rally the entire military might of the nation, prepared to annihilate the whole of the Conrads and Interstellar Alliance at any expense. This was not solely for retribution, but to preserve the dignity and honor of the entire Drutin royalty. A formidable fleet, harnessing the nation's full strength, would far surpass the capabilities of the mere Conradson Interstellar Alliance to confront. What shall we do now? We cannot simply relinquish the princess before we have even managed to escape. I scarcely believe those adversaries trailing us will grant us leniency. Qingjin remarked with a sardonic smile, gesturing towards the ever-expanding fleet pursuing the Huaxia. We shall proceed from this point. Kaijin Hao retrieved a meticulously prepared navigational chart, indicating a particular location. Is this truly the case? Qingjin exclaimed in astonishment, gazing helplessly at the designated point selected by the chief of staff. He comprehended that if he were to pursue that course of action, the chances of locating the 3rd fleet would dwindle even further.